You are listening to an American Free Press podcast.
Joining me on the line is William J. Makufka. Mr. Makufka, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, would you prefer William, Mr. Makufka?
Just please call me Bill.
Okay, Bill, thanks. Now, Bill, the reason you're on the program is because your brother was Scott Makufka, who went by the name Victor Thorne. Now, was his middle name Robert? Is that right?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And, of course, as most people know, sadly, Scott had taken his own life just 2 days ago on his birthday, yes. August 1st of this year, 2016. He would have been 54. He may have been 54. Some people know when they were born in the morning or in the evening. Did you have any idea of?
I actually do not, but I considered him to have been 54.
Okay. So a lot of folks, of course, are really upset. Well, I know I am because I've known your brother for many years, and we have done many interviews together. We spoke on the phone somewhat regularly, and I considered him a friend. We met several times. We hung out. We really had a good time together. Victor, myself, Pete, whoever else was around at the time. But a lot of people are very hurt by this event, and many people can't believe it. And I want to get into that in great detail. But if you'd like to, Bill, let the listeners know a little bit about who you are, where were you born, how old you are, and your relationship with Scott, and then we'll lead up to more in the current day.
Right. I am 52 years old, born and raised, as was Scott. We were born and raised for the biggest portion of our life. I'm saying I was probably 2 when we officially took up residence in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. That would have made Scott 3.5 or so. So I consider we spent our whole life in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. Educated, we both went to the same St. Mary's Public High School, through the public school system through here in St. Mary's. We're a very small town in Elk County, Pennsylvania. We're in the Allegheny Mountains, so we're very rural. Have known Scott for 52 years. We were brothers. We were close brothers. Like any other brothers, we did things brothers did together. I consider our relationship was always a very close relationship. I'm saying our adult life here, we talked generally at least once a week, I would say. But anytime an event came up or something came up, we were avid concert goers together, so if I saw of a show or he saw of a show, we would contact each other, and we travel around the area here and see various shows and stuff, and we talked up-to-date politics, just the general happenings. Another big topic for us because of the area was Penn State University and the scandal and stuff that had gone down there, and
right.
We both have an avid love of not only Penn State, but State College. Scott loved State College. That was his home, and he loved it, so that was our relationship. We were very close. That's what I would say about our relationship.
Okay, and any other siblings?
There's 2 sisters.
Okay, and they're living?
Yes.
And first let me ask you, how are you taking?
Very hard.
A lot of people are. A lot of people are leaving comments. Go ahead.
My brother, my best friend. So it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I basically haven't turned on the news in 2 days. I don't have anybody to talk to about. So, tough. Very tough. Devastated.
A lot of people that I've talked to about this are asking the same question. I don't mean a lot, just a few of the close people in the organization. And the question is, why now?
The best that I can understand. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of friends and talking with family, my father, a lot. We're all trying to sort this thing out. And what I've been telling a lot of people is that Scott was a very complex person. And by that I mean that Scott had an enormous knowledge base. He was very well read, very knowledgeable. Scott knew a lot about a lot of things. He has to be understood as a very complex person. I can't figure out why now. To the best of my knowledge, and what I'm telling people is that I'm sure a conversation that Scott had with you or a conversation Scott had with Pete or a conversation that he had with my sister or my father with me were always different conversations. Scott talked to you about what he thought your relationship was based on. Scott and I talked politics, but Scott and I didn't talk about a lot of the stuff that he was doing through the press in depth, just because that wasn't what our relationship was. So for me to pinpoint why now, I don't know. What I'm telling everybody is that I understand what he did, but I don't comprehend it. His reasonings were that he absolutely did not like dealing with death and sickness. I knew that and understood it my whole life with him, that funerals, wakes, anything like that, anything that had to do with the unsavory part of that death and any of that sickness, he didn't like, and he avoided it. So why now? The best I can gather, and this is, again, having very in-depth conversation with my immediate family, is that we knew he didn't like any of that. And it was openly known through our immediate family that if there were any passings, be it grandparents, aunts, uncles, if there would have been a sibling, if our parents had gone, he was not going to be there in attendance. He just didn't like it. So I understand that Scott did not want to get old. He was, and we are still right now watching my parents, who are in their early 80s, going through a lot of health issues. And I'm sure that that played a part into it too. And also, it's my true belief that Scott very much believed that death isn't the end, that we continue on. You know, Scott was very well read, very well versed, as anybody I've known in not only the Catholic religion, but a lot of religions and faith. We're a very strong, small Catholic town up here. I mean, St. Mary's. He understood all of it. I'm not ever, not to you, not to anybody, going to try to explain why I think he did it. All I know is that he truly believed his journey was done, and he wanted to see what came next. That's what he wanted to see, is what came next. My reason for doing this, my reason for wanting to talk to you, is that I'm not going to judge Scott, nor is our family going to judge Scott on, be it our beliefs or anybody else's beliefs or wishes. We're going to base our acceptance of what happened on what his journey was, what his belief was, and what he wanted. And I'm not going to judge him and say, well, I think that was a complete waste because he was such a young man. No, I think Scott truly believed that he had accomplished what he had set out to accomplish. And being, I don't even know the word that you want to use, being spiritual or whatever, he truly believed that we continued on, and he wanted to see what was next. That's what I believe. And I want it to be known that that was his completely 100% his choice. Right. No outside interference, nothing. That's my point.
Right. But there might be some people who say that, well, he was at the top of his game.
Yep.
He was recognized by a well-known author,
yep.
Actually co-authors of the recent book about Clinton, The Clintons' War on Women. They dedicated their book to Victor, among certain other people. A deal was cut with a Polish publisher to translate his Clinton trilogy and sell it in Poland, which it is happening right now. Again, people are wondering why, when he accomplished so much recently.
Yeah.
That, I think, is one of the things that is really confusing people as to why now.
I may be repeating myself a lot here, but I don't comprehend why. I mean, he never had an open conversation with me about this. I was not aware of what his plans were. I know he always spoke of, I'm not going to get old. I'm not going to get sick like that. I'm not going to go through. Watching my father, who had numerous bypasses and prostate cancer and stuff like that, and my mother going through the stages of Alzheimer's now. I guess if I knew the exact answer to that question, I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing right now, but I don't know the exact answer to that. And I guess the truth of the matter is, if we're going to talk about truths, he's the only one that knew that.
That's right.
He is the only one who knew that. And I'm going to, based on a lifetime of knowing him, respect and honor that based on his wishes and not what I think and not what you think and not what all these others that you're talking about who are mentioning his recent success. I'm not going to judge him on what they think. I'm going to remember him based on what he thought. My end conclusion to that is that he obviously did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And I'm honoring that, and the family is honoring that. And the only thing that I would really wish on the family's part is that others would respect that. There's nothing to it. There's nothing more to it than that. Don't try to read anything more into it. trust me, we've been down the path with the family here, and there's nothing there. Scott didn't care. The Scott that I knew, and I'm basing this on my opinion and the Scott that I knew, who I knew for 52 years, Scott didn't care about that success. That didn't matter to him. He always told me, one of the quotes that he told me the most is, Bill, I am the luckiest person on the face of this earth because I'm doing in life exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it. I live in the perfect town that I love living in. He said, I have the perfect life. I would change nothing in my life. He was truly a completely happy person. He was at my house 1 week before he took his own life. And we sat on my back porch, and we had a little hamburger cookout with myself and Josh and him and my parents, and it was like any other time we had ever done it. Even my wife said, Scott made me laugh. He was just a fun person to be around.
Did he have any health issues?
None. Scott walked at least 6 miles a day. Spring, winter, fall, summer, it didn't matter. Rain, shine, it didn't matter. Scott walked 6 miles a day. Scott didn't go to doctors. He didn't go to dentists. I don't know the last time he went to a dentist or a doctor. He was healthy. Unless somebody else has some type of information, which I'm basing this on our immediate family. No, Scott was completely happy, and he had never mentioned to me, we always asked each other, how are things going? How are you? Are you okay? No, he never mentioned a health issue ever. Like I said, I saw him 1 week before. So
there's a lot of people leaving comments under the article that's up on the American Free Press website, and some of them are talking about health. And just so you know, Bill, I'm asking some of these questions to really answer what people are asking.
Right.
So people are wondering if he wasn't in poor health, if he didn't have any health issues, then why not just wait until you do to end your life?
He did not even want to begin to start experiencing that. He didn't want to start experiencing that.
Do you know how he developed this fear of this? Was it from your folks, the issues that they're going through?
I don't know. I just know that as early as my recollections, when an aunt and uncle or something died, as young kids, we would have to go to wakes, because, like I said, Catholic community, you'd have the wakes and the funerals and the whole ceremony and the process and all that, and none of us liked it. I mean, who would? Who would like to do that? Nobody did. Scott liked to be happy. He liked to be happy. If I called him up and started talking about a sad subject, it was turning him off. He didn't like it. Maybe that was one of his downfalls. He was a human being. He had downfalls and he had faults. He didn't like that stuff. He didn't like to talk about it. He didn't like to be around it. And just to prove a point, when I was 44 years old, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. I remember when I made the phone call to him. The first words that came out of his mouth were, "Are you going to die?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's good." Well, through the process of the whole thing, he would give me a call once in a while and stuff, but he didn't like that situation. He didn't want to hear all of that. So was it a downfall of his? Yeah, maybe it was, but he had always been that way. I can't remember him not being that way, other than when he was not of age to make his own decisions. Like I know our first grandmother who died, we were pallbearers, which I didn't like either. I've never done it again since, but since his adult life, he's never been to a wake of anybody in our family or a funeral. Mm-hmm. So it's always been that way. Do I know why? No, but that was one of his inherent things that was in his makeup, that he did not like that.
He actually said that to me once, I remember. One of the fellows who passed on over at AFP, I asked him about it, and he says, "I don't do wakes or funerals."
No, he doesn't.
And also, as far as your brother not being concerned about money, I also have experience with that, because I had told Victor that the way that he was completing his Amazon sales was that he was leaving a lot of money on the table. If he just sold the books in a way where he would fulfill them, he could make a lot more money, cut Amazon out, and he, yeah, I'm happy, I make enough money. That's what he told me, I'm fine.
And you know something? When you said that, I heard his voice.
What was he like growing up with? Well, he was your older brother. How about the sisters? How old were they?
They're both younger than me.
Okay, so he was the oldest. So I was the oldest in a family of 5, and of course, older brothers sometimes could tease their younger siblings and that whole thing. How was it growing up with Scott?
I'll ask you, did you have a brother?
4 boys and 1 girl.
Okay, so you know how brothers get along.
Or don't.
Or don't, exactly. We grew up in what I consider to be a neighborhood. In our neighborhood, there had to have been 30 families or better. With the 4 of us, there was like Scott, and there was a good group of 5 or 6 boys in the neighborhood who were Scott's age. Then there was me, and there was a good group of 4 or 5 boys that were my age. And then there was my sisters, and so I'm talking about each one of us had like our own age group of kids to hang out with. Right across the street from our house was like a little abandoned lot, and that was our baseball field. The older kids and the younger boys, we'd all get together, and we'd have enough kids to play a game of baseball. And in the fall, we'd go to another yard down the road, and there was a yard with a big lot beside, and it was rectangular, and we would play football there. We were active kids, active kids. We were always out and about, going, doing, riding bicycles. We were privileged to have acres and acres of wooded area around our house where we could go back and do the things that boys do back in the woods. And it was a very, for our area, a very normal upbringing. Scott loved sports. Scott loved baseball. And I've told this story to my sister and a couple other people. My sister had never heard the story before, but Scott loved baseball. Like all the boys, we collected baseball cards. Well, everyone collects baseball cards and looks at the front with Willie Stargell and Roberto Clemente and all that stuff. Scott looked at the backs of the cards. Scott knew every statistic of every player on every card. And when he was trading baseball cards, he was trading for, well, hell, this guy's a much better ball player. He was the same person as a kid as he is an adult. He was always after that quest for the knowledge. He was a researcher. He was the same way.
How did all the siblings get along?
We got along like kids got along. You know, our family, we were fortunate. We traveled. We took every year at least 1 week-long summer vacation, and we had a little camper that pulled behind the car, and we would go around the areas, maybe to Ohio, Virginia Beach, upper New York State and stuff. When you're cramping 6 people into a car, you were a typical family. You know, you were
been there. Station wagon, right?
Well, not back then. They were some big old Buicks back then, but
no seat belts, right?
No, geez, yeah. No. I slept on the floor in the back seat. You know, so typical and normal a family is anybody. I wouldn't say anything out of the ordinary. I mean, Scott, even back then, I can remember, and I don't even know what grade it was. In his early grades, like maybe 3rd grade or 4th grade, they took aptitude tests, and Scott was within the top 1 percentile of his class. Not in his class, but and I don't know if it was a statewide test or what. He was in the top 1%.
Wow.
He always was intelligent. Always was.
No matter what you say, unfortunately, you probably are familiar with this recent phenomenon where no matter what evidence is presented or what someone might say, there's going to be now a greater percentage of the public who just don't believe anything that someone says. Right. So there's going to be people saying that you're really not his brother. No, I'm dead serious.
I don't. Listen, you have to understand from my point of view, and I didn't laugh at you. I laughed because imagine you and your brother, and knowing your brother for your whole life, and then in years later, your brother kind of comes up with this alter ego, and he lives his life as this alter ego, but when he comes around, he's still your brother, isn't he? Same kid that you jumped in mud puddles with and snuck out of the house when you weren't supposed to sneak out of the house. That's still the same kid. He's not this alter ego that he has become. Well, Scott had become Victor Thorne. Scott had become Victor Thorne. But to me, he was still Scott. That's where I guess I'm having trouble with this whole thing, that I know Scott lived that certain lifestyle. No, Scott didn't. Victor lived that certain lifestyle. A particular story that I can tell you. Up here in this area, one of the big things is the Clearfield County Fair. It's a big fair. It brings in major shows, like we've gone to see ZZ Top and Alice Cooper and stuff like that. Some big acts. So that was one of our annual trips, that he and I would meet up to the Clearfield Fair and go and see one of these shows. So we would get there early and grab a dog and something, and we would tour the fair. And at one point, one of his readers recognized him and spotted him and came up to him. It was like, "Hey, Victor Thorne, how you doing?" And really gushing over him. And Scott didn't like that stuff. I could tell he was like squirming in his boots. Made him feel uncomfortable. So, this guy chatted with him and talked to him, and, hey, I'm hoping that you're coming out with a new book and the general stuff. And I was kind of like looking out of the corner of my eye at Scott. And, he introduced me. Scott introduced me as his brother, and I can see Scott was not enjoying the attention. They shook hands and walked away, and he and I continued on, and we were kind of looking at some of the local photography and artwork that had blue and red ribbons on it, and I just kind of nudged him and said, "Victor." And he's like, "Ugh." So that was my little jab at him. When I start reading this stuff, it's like, that's Scott you're talking about.
Right.
I never viewed him as Victor. I viewed him as Scott. And when we talked, and we talked about anything, when he talked about the free press and his work and anything like that, he kind of told me what I honestly felt was his true feelings about how he felt about his notoriety and stuff like that. So to the naysayers, I'm like, think what you want to think. My purpose here is to give the facts. Trying to give the best facts that I can based on I know the genre of work that he did.
Right. And you are, but I want you to also, if you're not already, just be prepared.
Like
there's people who are not going to believe what you're saying.
And I don't care if you print this or not. If you want to put quotation marks around it that I said it, I don't give a rat's ass what anybody thinks. And that's kind of the way that he and I based our relationship, and I think we truly had a mutual agreement on, is that who cares what somebody thinks? What matters is what he thought, and what matters is what I knew he thought, and that's what matters. They can think what they want to think. They can comment and say what they want to comment and say on, but the truth being inside my heart, believing him, is that it happened exactly the way he got in his car that morning and rode up on top of the hill and got out and went and shot himself, because that's what he chose to do. Take an hour-long conversation that you had with me and an hour-long conversation with anybody else. There it is in a nutshell. That's what happened because of his choice. Now, can I tell you why? No, I don't think I know exactly why. And to be honest with you, I don't know if anybody will know exactly why. But that's what he did. Nobody to this point. This is day 3 after it happened. You're the first phone call that I have received from anybody outside of family or friends. I have not received anything from NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox News, the Clintons, Trump, anybody. Nobody has called me. And the only reason that you're calling me is because my nephew called a second time and kind of jumped the press about it. So where people are coming up with this stuff, I have no clue. Because there's nobody that I believe was closer to him than our immediate family.
How are the rest of the family members taking it?
Not good at all. Not good at all. I spoke with everyone in the family. Being that I'm still living in the hometown and the only one living in the hometown, I'm kind of like the center of the hub. My sister will call me. My nephew will call me. It used to be Scott would call me. Hey, how are the folks doing? I would distribute the information. I was kind of like that person, the unchosen one in the middle. I always had the unfortunate job of calling up whoever it was and, hey, Dad's in the hospital, had a heart attack, he's going to have bypass surgery. Mom's not doing too good with the Alzheimer's right now. Bill, my dad shot himself this morning. Can you go over and tell Grandpa? That's my role. 99.9% of the information that went through this family went through me.
Some people were wondering how he took his life, what kind of a weapon did he use. And
to my understanding, and again, this is coming through my nephew, just so it's perfectly clear to you, I want you to understand my nephew's relationship with me. Josh was born when I was 16 years old. Scott was 18 or 19, and Scott's first wife was from St. Mary's. It's no secret that Scott was divorced. Scott moved and went to Los Angeles for a while at one period of his life. So Josh and I's relationship was that of I saw a lot of Josh. And through his growing up years and stuff, he was kind of like my little brother / my son almost at times when Scott was out of the area and stuff. Again, if you talk to Josh, he'd probably verify this. I don't know if Josh has a stronger relationship other than with his mother than with me. I feel confident on my end in saying that. I think that he would probably pretty much agree with that. His relationship was much like Scott's and I, that we talked on a regular basis. And when we went to these concerts, Josh always came with us. We were like a little trio. We traveled, and it was just a blast.
People are also making comments about that, not on websites, but personally, about Victor having Josh, and how could somebody do that when they have a child?
Well, Josh isn't a child. Josh is 35 years old.
Do you have children of your own?
I do have.
So I have kids going from 25 to 9, and they'll always be your kids.
Oh, right. How could he do that? The house that they lived in, there was an apartment underneath, so Scott had the upstairs, Josh had the downstairs. They lived under the same roof for 20 years or better, so nobody knew him better than Josh. I'm not going to speak for Josh, but I know that Josh is very at peace with his understanding of what Scott did. And Josh has helped me through this a lot, understanding what Scott's wishes were. Josh completely understands and accepts. And again, we're talking about Scott, who is complex and had maybe what people would say a different way of thinking. But Josh, of anybody, is handling this very well. He completely understands it. Josh has been a very calming influence for me through this.
There's a lot of people who are hurt by this. To some of them, it really is a great loss.
Oh, it is. And trust me, nobody more than me
Right.
understands that. Nobody does. I hope it helps people deal with this. If they were truly a fan and a lover of my brother, Scott was a very, not just a happy, he was a very happy person. He loved life. And again, I hate to use the word a spiritual person, but he believed in nature. He loved going out for those walks. And I don't know if you've ever seen or been in State College.
Yeah, I haven't.
It's wooded and it's mountainous, and I've gone on numerous walks with him where they have a beautiful area set up with these boardwalks that walk by a river and running water, and you don't see a house and you don't see anything, and you go up on the mountains and you look down into the quoted Happy Valley. And I tell people, if I wasn't bound and stuck in St. Mary's, the only other place I'd want to live in the world is State College, PA. You had the culture in there. They had the Bryce Jordan Center, and they bring in major football and major entertainment acts. It was a major university setting, but if you drove 10 minutes in any direction, you were in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
He loved that. He loved being surrounded by the culture, but he also loved that he could get away from it in 2 minutes and just be out in the middle of nowhere and say, I just need to get away from people.
Right.
He was, I thought, a somewhat private person, but he loved life. He was happy, a happy person. I know that a lot of the stuff that he wrote about and talked about wasn't the most pleasant stuff in the world. And maybe my relationship with him was the release part of it. That, hey, let's get out of here and let's go do this. He loved his family. He loved to talk and joke around and kid, and he was truly concerned about the world. And he says, this country's going to hell. And with him taking his own life, to my best understanding, is that Scott had a plan and went out the way he wanted to go out.
To a lot of people, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
My wife told me when she heard about it, she said, I didn't know Victor, but she knew of him, and of course she knew I spoke to him quite a bit. And she said, but it's having an effect on me. She said, it just doesn't make sense. And I said, maybe that's why. Maybe because it doesn't make sense. Maybe he felt that the world didn't make sense.
Turn on Fox News and then turn on CNN. It doesn't make sense. The world doesn't make sense. How does the world make sense when we have the stuff going on in this world that we have going on? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that the direction that this country's going in, they're attacking our rights and wanting to take our rights away from us.
And would that be a reason, do you think?
No. That's absolutely not a reason. Yeah, the world's a mixed-up place, and we always talked about the world being a mixed-up place. But like I said, he had his little niche of paradise right down there. And understand the purpose of this is to make it clear that there's no foul play here. There was no foul play here. He obviously had a decision made that he was going to do, and he went through with it, and he did it. And it is absolutely a tragedy in the world. Any person who goes out for any family and takes their life, it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. We hate losing anybody. Save yourself the time and quit trying to read more into what this is. He chose to get in his car and ride up to the top of the hill and get out and walk to one of his favorite spots in the world, and he chose to take his own life. And all I'm asking of fans, not fans, people who are going to report on him, people who are going to speak or write or do anything about him, is to understand that it was completely his choice, and maybe nobody will ever truly understand it.
I think that people will come away with a greater understanding of your brother, and I think that many of them will then not think that perhaps what they were thinking before, that he did, in fact, decide to end his life on his birthday the way he did, and he wasn't killed by the Clintons, and he wasn't killed by the New World Order.
No.
And he took his own life, and even though it's completely a mystery as to why he would do it, especially at this time,
right,
I know for myself I'm going to miss him a lot.
Scott did what he did because he did it and wanted to do it and chose to do it, and for no other reason. And those are the two things. It was his choice by 100% free will to do what he did, and that he was not sick or anything like that, and he was a happy person. And that's all that I think anybody can really, truly understand with this, because, I mean, what more is there? What more is there? And it's tragic. It's a tragic loss to a lot of people. I have just recently found out. I didn't know that he had the popularity that he had. I didn't know it extended to that range. And I guess with that comes what is coming with it. So I just really did just kind of try to set this story straight for the people who really care to understand.
Right. I'm glad you did, Bill, and glad you took the time out to do that. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with us and, of course, the audience specifically. Yeah. William J. Makufka, Bill, I want to thank you so much for the time you spent explaining all this to the listeners. And I want to offer again my condolences to you and your family, and looking forward to talking to you whenever you'd like, hopefully real soon.
Dave, listen, I appreciate you taking the time out.